Welcome to Staying Connected, a podcast where I talk to people about their stories with VEDS, Marfan, Loeys-Dietz, and related vascular and aortic connective tissue conditions. This is your host, Katie, and before we get into the show, I want to remind you that the views, information, and opinions in this podcast are those of the individuals involved, and the information presented does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Any opinions that I express in this podcast are my own and not of my employer. Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to talk with Mike Osuna and Jeanette Garcia-Osuna about their son Lucas's story with Loeys-Dietz syndrome type 2. Lucas died at the age of 15 from an aortic dissection in Loeys-Dietz, which he was diagnosed with in autopsy. Heads up, in this interview, we will talk about what happened to Lucas that day. Please listen with care, take breaks, and seek support if you need to. Before we jump into the interview, if you like this podcast and want to support the show, check out the episode show notes for ways to do so. Let's get into the interview with Mike and Jeanette. Hey, thank you both so much for coming on and sharing your story and your son Lucas's story with Loeys-Dietz syndrome. Do y'all want to introduce yourselves before we jump into the interview? A little bit about yourself, what you like, anything? I'll start with you, Mike.
Sure. My name is Mike Osuna. I'm Lucas's father. I live in Miami, Florida. I'm a firefighter for Palm Beach County Fire Rescue, and I also own a gym here in Coconut Grove in Miami.
And I'm Jeanette. You may hear Jan, but Jeanette and Jan are the same person. And I'm Lucas's mom, proud mom. I am a Miami-Dade County Public School employee for the last 27 years. I teach pre-K. And we're excited to be on. Thank you for having us, Katie.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience and Lucas's story. Before we jump into Lucas's story, do you want to share some, about him?
Yeah. So we often joke that, just a little bit of history here. Jeanette and I are divorced. We are a blended family, I think is a term now, kind of like a modern family. So Lucas had myself and my wife, Jasenia. They met, or I met Jess when Lucas was 3. So she basically helped raise him. Jan, and I'll let Jeanette talk about Joka, but Jan is also married to a wonderful man named Joka. So we often joke that there's 2 different Lucases, right? So Lucas is one way at Jan's house and one way at my house. And oftentimes, Jan and I would talk about, we wish that sometimes we would experience the other Lucas, if you would, right? But I think that children, especially boys, are a little bit different with their mom. I know that I was, than with my dad, right? So my dad had a completely more firm, more serious personality, where my mom was almost like my best friend, right? So I think that's what we experienced just by us sharing stories. So the Lucas that I had was I would say the first thing that comes to my mind was playful. He was joyful. He always tried to make people laugh. He was very cerebral. So he would challenge you on a lot of historical facts or religious facts, or just his opinion of the world, right? When he was now in his later teens, the way that he was view the world, he would challenge me, and we would dissect, anything that came across our plate and try to understand like the underlying cause or development of the story itself. Lucas was a wonderful big brother. He was very playful with them, especially with my youngest, which is Nash. He's a 6-year-old boy. They had a strong bond, but Lucas was also disciplined. In my house, Lucas, we raised him as like a little soldier, if you would. And I'd wake up and he'd already be dressed with his Belen uniform and his suit with his tie and ready to go and his hair done. And I'd say, "Get me a cup of coffee," and he'd get it for me. And that's the Lucas that we had. And, we adored him, and we were, we loved the nights that he spent over, and Jan and I would often compete and argue, and we very loose when it came to the parenting roles that we each other had, but I tried to have him as much as possible, and she tried to have him as, and he would always feel tugged from one end to the other, like, okay, fine, just make it. So, as a whole, Lucas was just a very well-rounded, decent, good human being, and taught me a lot of lessons that I even recognized that while he was with us on Earth, where that I'd be like, man, this little dude just keeps, challenging me in ways, and especially when it comes to spirituality and religion. But really, he was a guiding light. The kid really impacted us as a family and his friends and everybody that knew him.
Yeah.
And I'd have to agree wholeheartedly with Mike. Absolutely right. Lucas was a spitfire, but straight as an arrow with Mike and Jess. And with Joka and I, he was loose, disrespectful, the nasty, like music, but so much energy in the house. The screaming until 5 a.m. on weekends on video games. Just wild. And there was no coffee served at my house. I would wake up and happily make him a tray of breakfast fit for a king. The back rubs and the soft, fun music to wake up. Just such an amazing kid. What a blessed life he had. Yeah, Mike and I just agreed to make it Disney World for him. And that's the way it was. The schools he attended, the friends he had, the community who so graciously lifted the families once Lucas was no longer here. Mm-hmm. But so funny, so witty, so smart. Just what a great kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're just blessed to be his parents. Extended, but blessed to be his parents.
Yeah. So to move into like the medical side of what he was like, tell me about, birth, like his, as a newborn, as a child, what kind of symptoms of Loeys-Dietz did he have that you didn't know were signs of that?
So Mike and I had 2 miscarriages prior to Lucas, very early on, 1 after. But here comes Lucas in between all that. And I think since conception, he was just really wanted. And week 18, we have an appointment for the ultrasound. And when we find out he's a boy, I remember turning around and I don't know how many candles I lit praying for a boy for Mike because it was going to be Thor. And so I remember turning around and looking at Mike, and Mike was like, but I wanted a girl. I'm like, what are you talking about? You wanted a girl. Like every saint on the planet just made this happen. And so I remember saying, can Mike leave now? And the tech saying, I think you may want to be seen by a doctor. Just give me a moment. And I'm like, now what? So the doctor came in and gave us the news that Lucas was going to be born with bilateral club feet. There was really no sort of what's the cause of this? I remember people asking me, is it that there's not enough space in the uterus? And I said, we were just told that it was bilateral club feet. It was sort of like a fluke. We were also given the choice to either research it or not. Mm-hmm. I remember Mike choosing the research it and Mike choosing the not. But it was a wonderful pregnancy. I remember thinking, God, I got to keep up with this guy who's Mr. Olympian. So I was at the gym every day and my family being like, take it easy. No, I'm going to work out. So it was a wonderful pregnancy, 41 weeks, C-section. And week 1, we started casting with Lucas. Mm-hmm. We started at Nicholas Children's, which was then Miami Children's with the orthopedic. It was tough. 3 weeks or 3 months turned into cast slipping, skin irritation. And then that turned into the night before an invasive surgery, Mike telling me I canceled surgery. I found a limb lengthening clubfoot specialist in Baltimore, Mount Sinai. Not your typical John Hopkins, but Mount Sinai. And there we were. And I was able to stay with Lucas, thanks to Mike's gyms, for 3 months, and we started all over again. So it was the casting turned into the tenotomy, which is the Achilles lengthening. And so Lucas had the pregnancy was amazing, the treatment was great, but he had the signs of it, the since birth, the sort of club foot, ding, 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 the bifid uvula. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I interject real quick because I want to press the point, Katie, how challenging and dramatic that time of Lucas's life was to Lucas and to the family. And I'm specifically because of all the practitioners that he saw during that time.
Yeah.
Numerous amount of doctors, especially here in South Florida, because they could not figure out how to fix his legs with the Ponseti treatment. It's a certain type of technique that just was not working out at that point. The other option was to open up his feet, take them apart, put them back together. So cosmetically they look correct, but then when I researched it, when they hit puberty and teenagers and they start to grow, that's where the pain is significant because of all the scar tissues that's built up in there.
Yeah.
So we went the Ponseti route down here in South Florida, and they struggled. We struggled. It was brutal. I want to emphasize it was incredibly challenging on Lucas and then us, Jan and I, as a family. But as we recall, all the practitioners that came in and advised and looked, and nobody said, hey, maybe there's an underlying cause to us. To us, it was just described as it's an orthopedic problem, right?
Right.
So when Lucas came out of the womb, and she said it earlier during that she had C-section, I recall him being pulled out. And when he was pulled out, I saw him being lifted over the current. And the first thing he did was stretch out his arms and his fingers. And I thought, oh my God, she gave birth to Wolverine because his fingers, it was a joke throughout his whole life.
Yeah.
But that's a sign of LDS. That's a sign of connective tissue disorder, are long, what they call spider-like fingers. And that was Lucas's fingers. I never described it as spider-like, but when you say it now, it totally makes sense, right? Like a daddy long leg, if you would.
Yeah.
And seeing him being pulled out and thrown on the little table where they go and cut it, when they asked me to come and cut the umbilical cord, seeing Lucas's feet as deformed as they were and his long fingers, I feel like it should have triggered something in somebody's head that said, hey, maybe we should do some further testing, genetic testing to be more specific. So I just wanted to emphasize that because that is important. When this podcast goes out there, anybody listening, like, don't just take it at face value with like, okay, he has an orthopedic problem. Now, mind you, maybe Occam's razor really doesn't play here, but I was also tall, long, skinny. I had some feet problem when I was born, not nearly as severe as Lucas, but I did wear the boots with the bars for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. So we're just like, oh, okay, I had these problems. I look like this. I'm 6'3" and slim. Jan is 5'9" and slim. Like, so it kind of makes sense that we have a long, slender child, but it was never presented to us.
Right.
And I'll let Jan continue because I think it's important that the next point that she was going to make is the bifib uvula.
Yeah, and actually before we continue and go further into that, I had a question about something that you said, Jan, which was you said something that you were given the option to research, or was that in relation to like the method of fixing the clubfoot? Or what did you mean?
It was sort of told to us like, every clubfoot case is different. It could be one foot, it could be both, it could be light, it could be severe. So sort of like tread lightly when you research because we won't know until your son is born.
Gotcha. The
severity of it. Or we were told to look into the Ponseti, which is 3 months of casting, into the tenotomy, into the boots and bars for 24 hours. So we did do all of that. But Lucas, apart from the bifib uvula and the club foot, at year 1, I remember I was Labor Day weekend at a local beach, Key Biscayne, and boom, asthma. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like kids nowadays where it was like, oh, bronchitis possible. No. Lucas was asthmatic. at year 1. So then it was the pulmonologist who, throughout his life, never said, Jeanette, take him to an echo. It was always, chest x-ray, pulmonology, like those, the breath tests, or let's put him on inhalers. Then it was all the allergies. He was allergic to several food groups, everything under the sun, environmental. So there were many, hindsight, red flags that it was a connective tissue disorder.
Yeah, and you also mentioned the bifid uvula, which is where the uvula, like the thing that hangs down in your throat, is like a split. It's split instead of like a solid uvula. There was something else too that I remember you guys telling me about, and that was the outward chest, like the chest deformity. So there's pectus
Yes.
excavatum, and then there's pectus, this one that I can never remember the name of.
Yes. So Lucas, we would talk about it on occasion with the pediatrician, and we did discuss just recently. But the sort of fix, if you will, to that is wearing a brace for 23, 24 hours. And we're talking about a water polo player. So are you honestly going to, wear the brace? And Lucas very seldom showed sort of like a complex towards that. The last maybe month, he would have friends over to like play basketball, and it was like so hot, and I would see him through the window, like take off his t-shirt and put it over his chest. I would never like say anything, but overall, I just think going to an all-boys school also had him sort of like grow that tough skin, and we would talk about it, but it wasn't extremely noticeable, but he definitely did have a protruding chest. And I would say maybe the last 5 months, the growth spurt was insane. And I would feed him breakfast fit for a king after school. Fortunately for me, unfortunately for him, my school is right across from his school. So I would, be there with full-blown lunch and chocolate milk. Post-practice, I would pick him up. Mike was nice enough to sort of like let me grab him after practice and drop him off at his house, even on his days, because I was so close. So I would feed him then. It was like, but he was just so long and lanky and bony. And
Katie, we could say this in his symptoms in one paragraph, right? But this is spread almost over 16 years. And we treated these signs, symptoms, and characteristics as Lucas individually, right? We treated them, the practitioners treated them. Nobody quite put the puzzle together of, man, this kid is falling into a connective tissue disorder, right? One, because maybe we didn't know, we've never heard of these. Also, they're very rare, and maybe if they're not on a practitioner's radar, or for maybe they've never treated a person with, maybe they read about it, and I don't know, this is just me assuming, right? Maybe they read about it in medical school and it's never crossed their plate. I don't know why. But when you look at everything that Jan just told you, after he passed away, and Marfan was the first name that got brought up, and then Loeys-Dietz when he tested positive for it, and you research it, we're like, the first feeling that comes is guilt. Is like, wow, how did this thing exist? And it never crossed our plate. We never knew about it. And when you look at the signs and symptoms and characteristics, and I'm speaking specifically about his long fingers, his hyperflexibility, because that's one of the key points of connective tissue disorders. Weeks before Lucas passed away, and if I say the word Dada, it just comes out because that's what we called him in the house. Before he passed away, I remember Khalid, my daughter, showing off on how flexible she was, and Lucas, flexed on her and put his foot behind his head as he's eating dinner and just continue the conversation like nothing. And I'm like, dude, you're like Bumby. Like, that's incredible that you're that flexible. We praised it, right? Like, we never thought like, ding, 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 light bulb. That's a sign of connective tissue disorder. Who would, right? Unless
and that's a really good point, Mike, is that, and I want to emphasize it, that this was not your responsibility to notice it. Like, I know that you all probably know that, but with the number of doctors that he went to, like the it's less of a problem of like y'all, like it was not your responsibility to know anything about connective tissue disorders or recognize those signs in your kid. Like that was the responsibility of the doctors to be educated and informed about these things and mention it. And as you mentioned, like there were a number of specialists. I think Jeanette, you started listing off like the pulmonologist, and of course he had like PT for his feet, like the club feet, and that there were all of these things. And there, of course he has a pediatrician too. Like there's so many opportunities for somebody to notice something if they have been informed on connective tissue disorders. And so I just want to make sure like you don't feel that responsibility.
Yeah. I'd like to jump in here.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. PT, OT, all of it, you name it. With the Cass growing up, we would joke and say we could write a book about Lucas. Actually, the day of the incident, they said one of our players passed out. And when they said Lucas, I thought, oh my God, like how much more? Please don't let it be my Lucas. There was another Lucas on the team. But that being said, Katie, and I could only speak for myself, I know for a fact that Lucas's life, having known the diagnosis early on, Lucas's life would have been so completely different. I mean, when I tell you wild and lively, jumping off cliffs, recreational basketball, like there was no slow down, stop moving. Like Lucas was just go, 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 go all the time. So knowing that something could have happened even that day, Katie, had the coach not let him jump on that list to go to the tournament, and his expiration date would have been March 28th, 2025, and it would have happened in a seat at school. There has to be, I know there is a higher power, and Lucas, honestly, and there's almost a commonality in the amazing families that we have been introduced to. There's almost a commonality in these children that they are literally supernatural. And now it's our mission to honor Lucas, to raise funds for whatever, create awareness, educate, so that hopefully in the future, if people do get the diagnosis early, we can help them in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I'll add to that. So Jan has really helped, and my wife has as well, but Jan, being that it's her biological son, has really helped corral my emotions and pull me away from guilt and anger. Like any parent that you hear our story or a story similar to it, the first thing that you're going to be is angry. I mean, many of my friends have voiced their opinions on the scope of how many people had seen Lucas and never even mentioned it, never even gave you a pamphlet that said connective tissue disorder and said, hey, your child has bilateral club feet. Chances are very, very slim that this is the cause, but you may want to look into it. And here's a pamphlet, read a little bit on it, right? So Jan has done a very good job of that and has allowed me to understand that for some reason, God did not want us to know, because of exactly what Jan is saying. Is not only cliffs, that kid competed in open water swims. That kid played football with me recreationally through I-9. I was his coach into high school and before he switched over to water polo and swimming. Things that other children with connective tissue disorders, based on their treatment protocol, their plan through their doctors and through their parents, put these kids maybe like in arts and crafts and music and stuff, because they really can't raise their blood pressure. They can't go to crazy live and loud concerts like my son did, like Travis Scott concerts with me and seeing
Rolling Loud.
The whole nine, right? So Jan is right. Even knowing as of 2 years old, Jan, I'm going to be very politically correct on this term, but Jan was a very catering mom. Jan did everything for Lucas, and I would butt heads with her. I'm like, let the boy be a boy. Like, let him get his own stuff. Let him pack his own bag, like that type of stuff. But she's a mom, I'm a dad, two different viewpoints. But with that being said, if we would have known, I would have fostered that environment. I would have said, Jan, whatever you want, let's bubble wrap this kid, lock him in a bedroom door with soft music, right? Let's do that, because everybody would protect their child if they knew. Mm-hmm. So trying to cope with this and trying to understand the reason for this, we have come to the conclusion that because we've met families that have known that still have lost their children. There's just nothing they could do for some of these conditions that are so severe that these poor children just literally fall apart. And of course, the aortic dissection is where most of them go. So that's where we have found peace. But it's not to say that it's what's fueling us to help keep Lucas's memory alive, and then getting the voice out to practitioners, especially pediatricians, people that deal with children, and first responders like I am, mm-hmm. so that they're aware that these conditions exist, and maybe there's a screening protocol that is formed in order for people to recognize 15-year-olds that look like my son. He didn't have the facial features per se, like some people say he wore Marfan well. Bridget taught us that term. But when you look at him and see how long and lanky, mom, how long, has he grown up? Does he have a bifid uvula? What is that? Let me see inside his mouth. Like these quick little assessments, be like, man, you might want to get this kid checked out, right? So that's the path and the direction and the passion that we're leading our lives with, is keeping Lucas's memory alive and then helping raise awareness so this doesn't happen to somebody again, right? I am no longer angry, if you would, with all the people that saw them. I am dealing with that, and I'm finding peace with it. But yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating when you could put his whole timeline in 2 paragraphs and people go, oh my God, how did this slip everybody? We don't know. Only God knows. We don't know why this occurred.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for raising awareness and fundraising and everything that you're doing to bring awareness to this. And the first responder awareness too, Mike, that you mentioned, I think is incredibly important. Do you all want to talk about what happened that day?
Sure. March 28th was a Friday. It was Miami-Dade County Public School spring break. As I mentioned before, I'm a teacher. So for the first portion of the week, Lucas was with Mike, Jess, and the babies, as we call them. And I was in Atlanta with my husband. Lucas was feeling a little bit under the weather, like a sore throat, which really wasn't that big a deal. Jasenia, I think, was under the weather. The babies had been a little bit sick. And so, as usual, I sort of jumped the gun and called the pediatrician and made an appointment for Lucas, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, I don't remember. He tested negative for flu and strep, and I got home midweek. Overall, he was doing well. He ate well. Everything was fine. And I do want to say that he had changed dramatically 2 weeks prior to the 28th. I remember dropping him off at school and him saying, Mom, I love you, drive carefully, and thinking, whoa, that's super out of character. That's more of a Lucas at his dad's house. So I thought that was great. And he did have what I consider now closure with many family members on my side, whether it was nice conversations or text messages or dinners. Or the day of March 28th, I dropped him off at school. He had a great breakfast. Love you, Mom. Drive carefully. I'll see you later. There was a tournament that he was not supposed to be at, and he was able to get himself on the list. So he was super excited to skip school, jump on the bus with his buddies, and head over to Ransom High School. I met him there and, had your typical thermos with chocolate milk post game to give him. And they were losing to a rival school. Lucas did not touch the water. 7 kids play water polo at a time. So number 22, he basically just sat at the bench. And I remember seeing him being, a goofball, pushing, shoving. The coach told them, run over to the sort of like waiting pool, and I will meet you guys at the other side to debrief.
At the end of the game?
Yeah, at the end of the game. Lucas didn't play that day, but he jumped in the water, and I remember staying back talking to some of the moms and hearing one of our players fainted. So I was getting my bag and whatnot. Then I hear it's Lucas. And I thought, oh my God, please, let it not be Osuna. Then I hear it's Osuna. So I started running down. A lot of that day, I sort of remember, but I don't. What I can tell you about that day is that the first person to take care of Lucas was my brother-in-law's first cousin. She's the athletic director at Ransom, Megan. The second person to help Megan was an anesthesiologist from Mercy Hospital. And the third person that helped was an off-duty firefighter, whom since I've been able to meet and thank. So that in and of itself has been a very beautiful sort of closure for me. Lucas was supposed to go to Mercy Hospital. We were then told in transport that he should be sent to Jackson, which is a trauma center. The firefighter who drove the rescue was a blend dad. I consider that to be a God incidence, which is not a coincidence, but someone sent by God. So he was trying to make small talk. I remember his hands were trembling. When we got to Jackson, I did hear one of the firefighters say something like, non-response. It was just like a movie. They wheeled Lucas into a room with what seemed to be 15 different people. And the doctor in charge said something like, the movies, I'm going to call him. And I remember telling him, you're not going to call him. You don't know my son. My son has been through hell. He's a fighter. No, don't call him. And then I remember thinking, I don't want Lucas back. He's not going to be that crazy, vivacious, wild, fun-loving clown. So, if that's the case, I surrender and take him, and please don't let him suffer. And that's sort of how it went down. With every negative thought that has ever popped into my mind, there's something positive that sort of like smacks the negative right out. And I'm so thankful that Lucas wasn't connected to a machine, didn't suffer from a long-term illness, that day where he wasn't supposed to be in the pool, he was, or that day I was able to be present and I can tell the story to family and friends that the minute he touched the pool, he was taken in an instant. The autopsy showed that he had an aortic dissection. We were told over and over again that the outcome of that would not have been any different. Even if Lucas would have been on an operating table, the outcome would have been the same. So I'm very thankful that God gifted me with Lucas for 15, almost 16 amazing years. and he was taken in that manner. I went on behalf of the family to the firefighters a couple months after to thank them for their work, for their service, for taking care of Lucas. A few months after that, I went with a few family members on behalf of the entire family to thank them for their service. It's not the norm, I would think, that you get a call from a 15-year-old that you can't sort of figure out what's happened. But yeah, I mean, I'm beyond thankful for so many things. I mean, I wake up and I go to sleep for the gift of Lucas, and that kid knew nothing but happiness. We later were able to, and again another blessing to me, we were able to speak to the medical examiner, who explained to us, and Mike jump in, but she explained to us that upon seeing Lucas, it was like ding, 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 ding,
Right.
Marfan. Like, here's this 6'3", super lean, XYZ teenager, and she had to figure out what cause of death was. But Marfan was sort of like, so we heard the word Marfan for the first time, jumped on the website. I remember my husband saying, like, Jeanette, look at this. I mean, this is like a poster child of Lucas. And then Lucas's pediatrician was also sort of like calling and saying, look, I haven't been able to sleep. It's not sort of like Marfan. Can you please have them check for Loeys-Dietz? I think that Lucas sort of like falls into like this syndrome. And so then we called the medical director, and she added the Loeys-Dietz. And I don't know if now that we're talking about the testing or what, but I do want you to know, Katie, that Lucas was born in 2009. And in 2011, we did have him genetically tested. I don't recall the why of it, but I do remember his pediatrician saying, like, let's just do some genetic testing. And Marfan, Loeys-Dietz, it had all sort of been like recently invented, if you will. So the marker wasn't checked.
Yeah.
So
So they didn't test for genetic,
No, they
like
didn't.
connective tissue disorders.
Not that.
And
No.
and Mike, before we go further about the genetics, I wanted to touch base with you about that day for you.
So that day was my day. Like I mentioned earlier, Jan and I would switch off, and I was supposed to have him that day. I was coming off shift, but I was fortunate enough to be assigned an additional project with my department. So that day we were at another station in West Palm Beach, which was an hour and a half away, recording some videos. The evening prior, I had told Lucas, hey, Pops, I'm going to miss your 9 o'clock game because I have this new opportunity, which I told you about. But I'll be there for the 1 o'clock game. Just give me time to finish filming, and then I'll head down there. And he was like, okay. And I go, tell your mom. And I remember being specific, like, tell your mom. And he said, done. So he told his mom. So then as I'm recording, I put my phone to the side, not to be bothered by it. And then it just kept ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. One of the camera guys grabs my phone and goes, hey, Mike, your phone has been nonstop. So I look at it from far, and I see it's one of his best friend's father. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this is to figure out plans for later on. Guys, give me 1 second. I need to take this. So I took it, and he's bawling. This guy's a cop, and he's just crying and crying and crying. And I'm assuming he's calling me like some people call your family first responder to, like, hey, what do I do, right? So I was afraid that it was because of his son. So I'm waiting for him to catch his breath, and I'm like, hey, catch your breath. What's up? Catch your breath. And then he said, Lucas. And he could barely speak. And he's like, Lucas, he's not breathing. So I just immediately just started running, and the production crew just started grabbing all my stuff and running with me to my vehicle. One of my good friends, Adrian Florido, he's yelling at me, I'm driving. He doesn't even know where I'm going. He's like, I'm driving. I'm like, you're not driving. Because I knew in my head he's not going to nearly drive as crazy and, now looking back at it, reckless as I would, because I was an hour and a half away from where they were transporting Lucas. So on the way down, I drove as fast as I could with 3 counties of traffic, super frustrated on the phone, and between Jan and Jess, my wife, calling back and forth and speaker, trying to keep me on call. I remember the one thing that I kept repeating it to them is, don't let them call him. Don't, because I know how the whole thing goes down. Don't let them call him. Don't let them call him. Like, wait for me to get down there. Don't let him call him. And then they were obviously worried about me. I continued to drive, and about 20 minutes went by that I didn't hear anything, and I knew it. When with that prolonged period of time, I knew that they were trying to figure out how to call me. I knew that it was terrible news. So then finally they called me, and I don't even remember if it was my wife or Jan. I was just black. I'm blacked out at that point.
Yeah.
And they said they called him, and I think the opposite happened what everybody thought would happen. And I pulled over to the side of the road and gathered myself, and I found a police officer, and I cut off the cop, and I said, my son, there's an emergency in Miami. Please give me an escort. And I don't know whether they're allowed to do this. I'm pretty sure they're not. But I guess this officer saw the fear in my face and gave me an escort, at least to an open road down in Miami. And then when I got there, we have a friend of ours that lost his child, schoolmate of Lucas. And I remember specifically when Jan told me that this child, I don't want to use their names because I don't have permission, when they told me that this child, 9 years old, passed away in his sleep. And I remember seeing his father, because I went to high school with his father, and then we were part of the same community. I saw him, and my heart would break every time I would see him, and I would think to myself, how does he go on? How did he live on? Like what most people think, like, and they say it now, like, oh, I would kill myself, right? Like, how do you move on from this? And when I got to the hospital, I was in shock. I could not believe that this was real. And I've discussed this, and I'm trying to make sense of this. So, to my understanding, I may be wrong, so I may need some fact checking on this. But to my understanding, there's only 5 states in the nation that require an autopsy to be done on a minor, and Florida is one of them. My cousin is a fire chief, and he came and he explained the whole process to me. And he goes, the reason the police officers are there is because they need to do an autopsy. Fast forward, they said it would take about 3 days for us to get the report back from the autopsy. And we've heard so many stories that, oh, we thought it was a shooter, and why are the cops coming in here and whatnot. All sorts of different stories of, oh yeah, he revived, he's good. No, he indeed did not revive.
So the news of it went viral.
Yeah, so the news, what happened was one news channel picks it up, and then it just spreads like wildfire, right? So before we knew it, it's on social media, it's all over the local channels, and then nobody's contacting me because they realize, like, oh my God, what can these people be going through? Yeah. So everything that comes along with that storm of the news being released and nobody knowing what happens, and you can imagine how the cesspool sometimes that is social media, the comment section and whatnot, and sharing, and oh yeah, that kid probably had this and this, he probably did that thing, and he probably took this. I don't even want to say the words on here, but right. That spread incredibly. Now, the positive and the spiritual side of that is that all of our friends and families, Belen community, CrossFit community, firefighters, I have 300 text messages on my phones that I can't bring myself to open up just yet because they're all on that date, 28th, 29th of March. But they all reached out to us and, whatever you need type of thing. So going back to the autopsy, when we got that phone call, we all huddled around the phone on speaker, both my family here and Jan's family at her house, was the first time that the medical examiner said, your son had an aortic dissection. Mm-hmm. Has your son ever been tested for Marfan? And we said, what is Marfan? And she described it briefly. She said, I'm going to run some tests on Marfan, if you allow me, to see if he has the genetic condition. So Jan already said the story, spoke to his pediatrician. Pediatrician called us back and said, have them tested for Loeys-Dietz. And we had to write it down because Loeys, how do you spell that? And sure enough, the medical examiner said, yeah, for sure, we'll add that into the testing panel. And they said it took about 90 days, which you could imagine, right? Like, we're dealing with the loss of our son. We don't know why. We've never heard of this. We're researching Loeys-Dietz and Marfan, and we're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then all of a sudden, we get the phone call that says, yes, your son tested positive for Loeys-Dietz type 2.
Mm-hmm.
So that diagnosis helped provide closure, right? Like, okay, so we at least know what happened to him. What's difficult is we now get connected to that whole community. And the community, the Marfan Foundation, connects us with a wonderful scientist named Ellen, right, Jan? My Ellen. And Ellen gets on a Zoom call, takes time out of her day. I think we spent 90 minutes on that call. And she is explaining to us how Loeys-Dietz work, how it happens. And I remember, out of all that conversation, she was describing how our DNAs are connected, the composition of the DNAs, and each letter is connected to, or each protein is connected to another protein. It escapes me right now, but I do remember my response to her was, so if the A, I believe is adenosine, is a T, we would not be going through this. She goes, correct. The A connected to an A, and that sends a instructions for the protein molecules, and they're not connected like you and I are connected, meaning they're very, very fragile. Again, I'm destroying the actual explanation behind this, but in that moment I realized this simple little miscoding of his DNA caused us to lose our son 2 weeks prior to his 16th birthday, and she said yes. And that breaks our heart, we have come to peace with this and now understanding the direction that we're in. But Jan's view of this and what a wonderful life that he had and all the lives that he touched and all the lives that he will continue to touch is what keeps us moving forward.
Yeah. And the medical examiner ended up amending the death certificate. Is that right?
Absolutely. One of the things that I was gung-ho about was making Lucas's cause of death be amended. So it went from aortic dissection to aortic dissection Loeys-Dietz syndrome. So he would count.
Yeah.
That was huge for me.
Yeah.
And I just want to touch briefly upon what Mike was saying. We have met some amazing families. They have been heaven sent, and our families are now part of that sort of club that you don't want to be a part of, but we're here to help. I mean, everybody has been so amazing.
Yeah. One of my friends with VEDS, I think what I see a lot in this community as a whole too is like, welcome to the best club that nobody wanted to be a part of, but it's like a huge part of your life that, like, for me, I wouldn't change my connection to this community at all. I don't know how to say that a different way, but it's the club you don't want to be. You don't want to have this, but it's the best place you can be if you do. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you
Thank
both
you.
got. Oh, you're welcome.
I honestly, I can't thank you enough for doing what you do for the families. I wish that I could do an eighth of what you do. The Moraleses, the Padillas, Bridget and her crew, even, the pediatric cardiologist, Dr. Moss here in Miami. So many her nurse practice. Everybody's just trying to like lend a helping hand.
Yeah.
And it's been really nice because honestly, not everybody has what we have. How many people aren't suffering, a loss or grieving without the support that we have? And so for me, that's huge.
You know what? With what you were alluding to, Katie, with what Jan is saying, the significance that Lucas passing away at Ransom Everglades, another prestigious schools down here in South Florida, and that story going viral. We have ran through this a million times, right? Lucas could have been sitting in his chair at school. Lucas could have been kept home, right? That day. He didn't have to go to that water polo tournament. it wouldn't have had the impact that it does now. The reason we're justifying this, because a lot of people like to keep this private, and every time somebody looks at me, I think to myself, what are they thinking? Oh, poor dad, poor pity. But I believe that it's the cross that we're here to bear. And through that, it's to spread the message about Loeys-Dietz and Marfan, honoring Lucas so that it doesn't happen again. So with that being said, I think it's given us direction of this is what your calling is. When he passed away, the news came and knocked on my door. And I had my pit bulls, which were the name that I call my firefighters, and they're very, very protective of brothers. And when I opened the door and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Osuna, sorry, Channel 4 News," my lieutenant ran outside barking. I'm like, "Whoa, calm down. Listen, calm down. Let me deal with these real quick." They just wanted to get the story right. It's hot news of the day, right? But I'm thinking, you're going to use me, but I'm going to use you to spread the message. I'm just not ready to spread. I'm just too emotional right now to spread it. So I said we will get back in contact with you. At that time, we were stuck in a predicament where somebody said to us, they're going to air Lucas's story. If you want to clear all the rumors that are out there, we suggest you put your face behind camera and you speak. We weren't ready. That was completely unfair to us.
Yeah.
So we brought everybody into the room and we said, it was me, Jess, Jan, and Joka, and we were deciding, what do we say? What statement do we say? Everybody's scared. Everybody's worried. Everybody loves Lucas. Like so many other emotions going on there. And that's when we called Mayor Francis Suarez. He just so happens to be a friend of mine. And hey, can you just go on air and just speak for us? I can't put my face behind camera. Jan doesn't this is unfair to us, but we understand the way that the news works. They're either going to fabricate a story or we got to get some facts out there. So he did us the favor. And the storm that happened after Lucas's passing, which brings me to the cardiologist that Jan is referred to. Her name is Dr. Marlene Mass, and she's out of Mercy Hospital. And we reached out because now we're concerned, how did Lucas get this condition? Is it one of us? At that point, we said we need to be tested and the babies needed to be tested. So my wife called, made an appointment, and that appointment wasn't until 5 months down the road to get an ultrasound and to do some genetic testing. And when they hung up, apparently the receptionist told Dr. Moss, "Hey, you know that Osuna boy that passed away? The brothers and sisters." She said, "Clear my calendar tomorrow afternoon, have them here at 4 p.m., bring them, absolutely, and bring the father too." So we all went in there, and she saw those children, the most wonderful, spiritual, loving. It was like if it was my aunt, the most beautiful human being I've ever met in my life. And she said, "I will do whatever you guys need me to do in order to help you spread the message about Lucas and his condition." And she's been there with open arms. She actually confirmed today that she'll be at the walk in February. And she was concerned about Jan as well. She said that those next 2 weeks, she had to open up her secondary office and open up on weekends from the amount of athletes in South Florida, or parents of athletes from South Florida, that wanted their children tested for this very rare condition that Lucas had, because everybody was petrified of what happened to Lucas, right? Mm-hmm. So, with that, again, it's our North Star is spread awareness, raise fund and spread awareness.
Yeah, and you have no idea how many of those people ended up testing positive, right? But because, right. To your point too, because of because it happened in a very public space, because it was covered by the media in such a public way, you did potentially get at least one person diagnosed, and did raise some awareness through that.
Katie, and you brought me back to the thought that I had a while ago was 5 states, again, fact check me on this, 5 states in the nation require mandatory autopsies on children under the age of 18. So our logical thought is, how many children have passed away in other non-mandatory autopsy states from a connective tissue disorder, an aortic dissection, and they just write it up as a heart attack?
Right.
Because why else would a child, a 15-year-old athlete or non-athlete recreation, why else would they pass away? They bury the child and they don't know. So although the numbers statistically that I've heard is 5,000 LDS patients in the world, that number could be double or triple, but they just don't get tested, right? So
Yeah.
this has been brought to us many, many different times. How many people in the history of society has passed away from an aortic dissection because they have some sort of condition or non-condition, like John Ritter, but they don't get tested and they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a great, I'm glad that you bring that up, because I think, both in Loeys-Dietz and in VEDS and probably in Marfan too, although I think there's more awareness for Marfan than for Loeys-Dietz and VEDS so far, that there are a number of people walking around today that do not know that they have one of these connective tissue conditions, whether it's Marfan, Loeys-Dietz, VEDS, another form of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or another genetic, was it like a familial thoracic aortic disease, FTAD, or there's all of these acronyms, but that people don't know. And what does that mean for the number of people out there who actually do have this? Is it as rare as we are, that as like the numbers say in the research papers? And I've seen some like really, really wide numbers of prevalence based on there's all of this science, and I can't remember who it was, but there was a research presentation on, I think it was through the VEDS science meeting that the Marfan Foundation did with the Defy Foundation a few years ago, but where they take the types of variants within the condition and then kind of extrapolate how many people are expected to have the condition based on the number of people diagnosed versus the type of variants that they're basically not seeing in their offices, which is super. I think I'm getting into the weeds here, so I'm gonna move on. But the point being, there's so many people that don't know, and what would it mean if we had a way for everybody to know earlier, and how much would that help research, and how much would that help possible treatments and getting people the help that they need before things like this happen too? And would that change it, but I think awareness is so important.
It's huge. And we were very careful in the beginning, right? Because we didn't want to fear monger. We didn't want to send everybody for a panic. Like every child that plays sports in South Florida needs to get an ultrasound. Like we didn't want to send everybody overboard. But maybe some sort of screening, maybe, what to be aware of. Jan has said it before, and so do I. I walk around. You show me a teenager that's over 6 feet, that's tall and lanky. God, I'm biting my lip. Like, don't go up to that parent and say, "Hey, have you heard of Marfan syndrome?" Like, should I? Like, I don't know how to navigate that. Yeah. But I do believe that it's clearly we're missing these diagnoses, and clearly, in my belief, I could be wrong, there have been more children that have passed away from a connective tissue disorder that have not been diagnosed of that, and it doesn't get stated. Jan was hell bent on we're amending his death certificate, and it's going to say Loeys-Dietz types 2, and she went through the process and she got it done. So,
yeah. So you mentioned the walk that you're doing. Tell me more about the walk. Tell everybody how to get involved if they're listening and want to be part of that.
The Marfan Foundation is the large conglomerate. It's the mothership, if you would. But underneath it has the Loeys-Dietz Foundation, the VEDS Foundation, and whatnot. And they have a symbiotic relationship in where funds get distributed in order for research and treatment and whatnot, right? And push it. We went to the Marfan Foundation, and they are incredibly transparent on how their money is distributed. They're accredited by a bunch of third-party companies out there that do their homework when it comes to foundations and where money goes. So they reached out to us, and they bestowed us the honor to be the co-chair family for the Loeys-Dietz Foundation down here for the South Florida Walk. They have several walks across the nation. They have like a season that they go by, and all they're doing is raising awareness and raising funds and helping these families support and treat their patients and their children better. So they asked us to be the co-chair, and that this walk is happening February 1st, 2026 at TY Park in Broward. And our goal is $19,000. Lucas's number was 19, and our goal is to raise $19,000 under Lucas's name. We have spread it to friends and family, all of his communities, the Belen, the CrossFit, the firefighter community, Jan's teacher community. With that, I asked, in the CrossFit world, we honor fallen soldiers and civilians, people that are close to the CrossFit community, by designing a workout and naming it after them. So shortly after Lucas passed away, some people had reached out to me and said, hey, we want to dedicate a workout to Lucas. And I said, give me a second to breathe here. I'll design a workout and we'll dedicate it to Lucas. And usually the workout has some sort of representation to the child. So for him, it was his water polo number, the age and when he passed, and then his birthday. And then I turned to the Marfan Foundation. I said, look, I know that this is a walk. I know that it is very inclusive because you want people to participate. There's some folks that show up in wheelchair and crutches. I love it. Would you allow me to do the Lucas workout prior to the walk? And they said, absolutely. We love that idea. So at 11 a.m. is the Lucas workout. And then at 12 p.m. is the festivities and the walk. So they have been nothing but very generous with us. And we're looking forward to it. And now our only job is spread awareness, spread the link, sign up, meet us down there. If you're not local or you can't walk, then you could just simply donate under Team Lucas. And that's, again, like I said, that's our vision for the next couple of months.
Yeah. And I can put that link in the episode show notes. So if you're listening to this and you want more details or you want to donate to Team Lucas, that information is in the show notes for you. I know that we've been talking for a while. I want to be cognizant of your time, but do you want to talk about conference and how that was? Because I know that you went to conference.
We did. We were able to go to conference in July. Conference was a whole bag of emotions, but the fact that we were able to be there in person, we found out that the Marfan conference is 1 year virtual, 1 year in person. So the fact that this year it happened to be in person and that we were able to participate, it was just mind-boggling. To hear the stories, to sit through the different workshops. It was a lot, but it was also amazing. The networking was huge, and it was, for me, it was just amazing. It's really nice.
So I approached conference in a different manner, and it was shortly after, I think probably 3 months after Lucas passed. So I think we were both still in shock, but it's almost like you got to do something, because clearly laying on the couch, crying on the fetal position till 4 a.m. is just not healthy. And we were just chomping at the bits, just any assignment, anything to keep our brains busy. So I went down the road of learn as much as I possibly can about this pretty complicated condition when you look at the connective tissue as a whole. So my purpose was to learn about what took my son, and is there a way to help somebody else not go through what we're going through, which I've learned is very challenging. Once you have the condition, it's very challenging. So that's how I approached it. It was an emotional roller coaster. Everything from seeing other children with Loeys-Dietz and Marfan and thinking to myself, oh my God, they could be cousins. Like, there's so many children that had similarities to Lucas that I'm like, man, yes, they look different. Yes, a lot of them don't have the same extreme characteristic, but you look at them and you're like, man, this is almost surreal. And then listening to doctors speak, listening to families give their stories about their children, whether they're alive or they passed away, all of that, clearly emotional. And my direction was learn as much as you can, take as many notes as you can and stuff, so that you could go back and maybe educate. The foundation has a program called the Aortic Advocate, and this is where they grab lay civilians and they put them through a program to teach them about these conditions and what happens to the aorta.
And that's the John Ritter Foundation, right?
Correct, yeah. And then these advocates go out and spread the message. As a matter of fact, I met a medical student resident or a medical student from FSU that said, "Hey, Mike, you should come up and speak at." He mentioned the name. He goes, "But you're speaking to future doctors. You're speaking as an advocate for this and educating us and just putting it on our plate." So it's something that we're going to pursue to be an aortic advocate. But I went up there just to learn. It was the toughest thing. I mean, I could tell you that every day is incredibly tough, but being up there was incredibly tough and a lot of tears, a lot of anger. But we learned a lot and we realized, wow, what a beautiful community that we don't want to be a part of. But man, thank God that you guys are around, because you've been able to help us answer questions and comfort us and know that we're not alone. I can't imagine being a parent that lost their 15-year-old and has nobody and has no support, no system, no answer, no closure. So yeah, it's been quite the whirlwind.
Yeah.
The monthly grief sessions are also very tough, but also very beautiful. I can speak for my husband and I. We have done a few grief courses, and my favorite one, I think, has to be the monthly grief sessions for connective tissue.
Through the Marfan Foundation?
Yes.
I'm going to put a link to that. If you're listening to this and you need some of these resources, I include a bunch of resources usually in the episode show notes, so I really encourage you to check those out, and I will include a specific link to that group too, for anybody else that's going through this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
They're very supportive. It's a supernatural sort of session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do y'all have advice for others that are going through this, that are listening to your story? I don't know if advice is the right word, but something you'd want to say to somebody else who's going through what you have gone through.
Yeah, if anybody just wants to talk, for me, I've found so much comfort in running towards people that have, and I get it now. I think when we lost Lucas, people were reaching out, and I was like, who is this person and why are they, and I get it now. It's almost like it's just a very specific sort of understanding when you lose someone. Like, grief is going to be there every single second of every single day from this moment on, and they need to know that whatever emotion they're feeling, it's an okay emotion. And even if it's laughing, I just was recently text messaging with the mom who lost her son in July, and I sent her something, and she's like, oh my God, I needed that laugh. And I'm like, doesn't it feel good to laugh? Like, it's okay to laugh. Like,
yeah.
The kids would want us to be laughing. So I don't know that I have advice. I don't know what I would say, but I think the first thing that I think of is please reach out. And I did. I mean, I reached out to the Padillas. I reached out to Bridget. I loved meeting, Connor's older brother. And I reached out to Heidi. I mean, just the families are amazing. And they're there. They're there to support you, to catch you, to listen to you, to send you whatever. And so I think that's where we are now. I'm sorry for your loss. But how do we honor our loved ones? How do we honor them? That's what they would want. How do you honor them? My husband would ask me that every night. Have we honored Lucas? Have you done the most minimal thing to honor Lucas today? And that to me was huge when he would say that.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I would say is the signs are out there. There are signs. Whatever religion you practice, whatever faith, just keep your eyes open, your head up, your ears, your heart open too, because they're there. I mean, our loved ones aren't far away. Part of what Lucas sort of did when he was nudging us, if you will, a couple weeks before, was he would tell us to watch the movie Interstellar, and we weren't sure, why Interstellar, and think he even like said, "Oh, I cried in 4 different parts." And so I watched it while I was in Atlanta, coincidentally, and I thought it was a really beautiful movie. And then my husband helped us get together with a local small movie theater here in Coral Gables, and we put together a showing of Interstellar. And the night we saw it with Lucas's friends and some family members, I remember it being like a whole other sort of meaning. And I haven't watched it a third time, but the third time I watch it, I'll for sure be like that nerdy teacher with a notebook and a pen to write down notes. But honestly, it's just keep your head up, if you've lost a loved one to whatever, and your eyes, your ears, and your heart open, because there are signs. They're there. They're close by.
Yeah.
Jan, listening to her speak, I think, as in my belief, as humans, we go through this evolution, and there's a chapter in our lives as we go through adolescence and then falling in love and then having children. And then when you have children, the purpose of your life, in my opinion, is to live for your children and make their lives a better place. You're going to benefit because you're going to get the joy of seeing your children excel, and they're going to benefit because they have great parents. So when you lose a child, you think, what's my purpose? Like, my purpose is gone. I am blessed that I have 3 children, the little ones that are 6 and 7 right now. Jan lost her only child. And I've told Jan, adopt these kids. They're your kids. They're Lucas's brothers and sisters. But when I think of what is your purpose, I think that's what I think I could, package. And when Jan says that her purpose is to reach out to other families that lost one, and she's rubbing off on me. When I found out about that mailman that's daughter lost her boyfriend just a few days ago, I said to my in-laws, please get me his number. I want to reach out to him, just say, hey, we're here. We're here for you. If you want to come and sit and have coffee in my backyard and not speak, I'm here. If you want to cry, if you want to talk about it, if you need me to help you with research, I'm here. I think this is the evolution of, my grief in particular, 6-7 months out from this. I personally don't think that I have it figured out by any stretch of the imagination. I can tell you that when it first happened, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to read messages. I didn't want to answer phone calls. I didn't want nobody in my house. And my pit bulls and my wife did a good job of misdirecting people in other ways so that Mike is not bothered. However, the one person that I wanted in my house was my friend that lost his 9-year-old son. And I said, I only want him. And I called my cousin. I said, get him at my house. And he was here that Sunday, walked in, larger than life, like he always has been, gave me a great big hug, very composed, sat next to me on the couch, put his hand on my thigh, and I looked at him with emotion, and I said, how are you still alive? How did you not take your life? How are you moving on? How are you this human being that still lights up a room wherever you go, telling jokes and making sure that everybody's okay? And he said, it's not me, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. He goes, I'm working through him. Those his initial words to me. And then as we're sitting there and people start arriving, he asked me to go for a walk. He said, let's go for a walk. And we walked out. So that's my first advice, right, is spirituality. And as we walked outside, he said to me, have grace. Those are the only words. We didn't talk for about 100 yards. And he just said, have grace. And I go, what do you mean by have grace? What do you mean by that? Yeah. And he goes, have mercy. He said, I know that you as a father, you're a protector and a provider, and somehow you're conjuring up this story that you're blaming yourself for Lucas no longer being with us. So have grace. This is not your fault. This is what it was written. Do not blame yourself. And he was right. Those first couple of months, guilt was such the dark place that I felt. I couldn't even mourn. I couldn't even be sad because I felt so much guilt. Like, how did this slip through the cracks for so long? So that was my second piece of advice through my friend, is to have grace. And then the last thing that he said to me that's very profound, that I remind him probably once a month, thank you for those words, is he said, we're all spiritual beings living the human experience. And that clicked. That, along with Interstellar, along with all the signs that Lucas has sent us, my My football number is 89. I'm very near and dear to my football number. It's all over my house, and it's the name of my gym. And then 19, which was his water polo number. Those numbers have appeared to me in so many different ways over the past 7 months that I'm like, there's more to this than just this skin and this shirt on my body right now. There's more to this. And Lucas was doing that as he was growing up, when he was teaching me about theology and religion and counterpoints and arguments and whatnot. And I'm like, I know, dude, I know you're pushing me down this ride. And I didn't grow up in a very religious household, but that has been the direction that I'm heading. But he was just pushing me that way, and now more than ever. So I think that Jan is right. I cannot believe that this is all there is. I know that my son is around us, and I hope to God one day I could end up where he's at, because we are convinced that he is in heaven. Like Father Willie says, he no longer prays for Lucas, he prays to Lucas. And that's the direction that we're going in, and it's the only direction that we could go.
Yeah. Do you want to end this podcast with your favorite things about Lucas?
Yeah. My wife is very careful on what she sends me, because unlike Jan, I can't sit there and watch videos. I can't sit there and look at pictures. I'm just not ready to do that just yet. I'll do it for a couple of seconds, but I just can't. I can't consume all of that content. So yesterday, she just sends me a random video. When I click on the video, it's a video which I have it loaded on my Instagram. It's a video of Lucas in the back seat of the car as we're driving with a seatbelt on, sitting catty cornered with his feet over his little brother Nash. And Nash would bother Lucas so much, and Lucas loved every second of it. Kalia and Lucas had a special relationship because they were both very cerebral, almost the same person. So watching them interact, and Lucas was so good with her and understood and that, okay, this little girl's smart. I got to keep on my P's and Q's. My favorite thing of Lucas is watching him interact with his little brother and sister. That is where I saw the goodness, the wholesomeness. Lucas had so many wholesome moments when it came to, like, let me see how this kid's character is. Let me see if he has some integrity. And the dude will make the right decisions all the time. But watching him play with my other children, which obviously mean the world to me as well, and interact with them and be the big brother that he was growing up to be, was the most joyful thing. And the most amount of videos that my wife has is the interaction between Lucas and Nash and Kalia. And Jan said this: over the past couple of weeks, Lucas left us some gifts, one of them being a text message to me, but another one being an interview that he did, a 6-minute interview where he posted his camera up on a water bottle and interviewed Kalia and Nash while he's eating potato chips. I'm like, what would prompt him to do this? And I haven't been able to make it through the whole video, but it's a beautiful video, and it just reminds me of what a wonderful big brother Lucas was to his little brother, his little sister.
Yeah. That is so sweet.
Yeah.
I've seen the video. And
I'm sure you have.
And I've seen it multiple times. And that video that Mike is talking about is so sweet. He's asking his brother and sister, like, who they're going to marry when they're older. It's just, and so patient with them. And it's wild. Like, I love that Lucas had his brother and his sister. I love that he had siblings. I love that, we would make sure that we would buy things so that he would have them to give to his brother and sister. If I had to answer your question, what's my favorite thing about Lucas, or one sort of story, is just everything. The gift that I was chosen to be his mom, that he had such an amazing life, like I said before, from the schools he went to his upbringing, to his faith, to
Take a breath, it's okay.
being able to go through the 6 boxes of memories that we have here in his room. the videos of the interviews when he was little, to the funny answers that he would give, to the love that he shared with so many. When we hang out with his friends, whether they're his pre-K, elementary, middle school friends, to the high school boys, the difference in the ambiance, because Lucas is not present, is what I love. That Lucas was such a personality. I miss it, but I'm happy that we had it. And our purpose, he would tell me, Mom, get a hobby. Get out of my room, get a hobby. Our purpose, my new hobby, is to help others.
Mm-hmm.
And to honor Lucas in helping others. And I'm very thankful for you, Katie, for having us on, for the community that has supported us, for our family members, for my immediate family, my husband, who was sent to me by Lucas, because if this was the story that God had for me, having had Lucas and him having sent my husband, I'm nothing but a grateful person.
Well, thank you so much for sharing Lucas with me and with everybody. And thank you for raising awareness and for coming on and talking about his story. I'm just very grateful for you both as well.
Thank you, Katie, for having us on. I think this is a great outlet and just a wonderful opportunity to share Lucas's story and his memory to everybody that hears this. And then hopefully, it just adds to our mission to spread awareness.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks for listening to this episode featuring Mike Osuna and Jeanette Garcia-Osuna sharing their son Lucas's story with Loeys-Dietz syndrome type 2. If you're ready to meet others, get involved, or need support, there are links for you in the episode show notes, as well as information on research studies for people with VEDS, Marfan, and Loeys-Dietz, including those with the VUS. Any links mentioned in this episode are also in the episode show notes. If you like this show, be sure to share it on social media or give it a rating or review. You can also support the production of this podcast by joining my Patreon, making a one-time donation, or by buying merch. As always, my top tier patrons are listed in the episode show notes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.